We want to thank today's sponsors, the Tax Defense Group and Writer Junkie. You can contact the Tax Defense Group at 800-850-7973 and Writer Junkie's phone number 805-587-7966. Hi, welcome to the Talk Spot. This is Marcus, and today I'm joined by Rolly Crump and his wife Marie. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
If you wouldn't mind, can you tell us a little bit about your work and how you first got started in the Disney Corporation and rough timeline of when you started and, just some of the works that you did?
I always wanted to work for Disney ever since I was a little tiny kid. I saw the first cartoon I ever saw was the three little pigs. And my dad actually had a friend that was a projectionist, and so my dad says, "Do you want to see a little movie?" And I said, "Yes." And so he took me there, and I saw the Three Little Pigs when I was 3 years old. And I was really blown away by it. So that basically is what got me started. And as time went on and I realized who Walt was, I got more and more excited about wanting to work for him. And so it was in the back of my mind for a long period of time. And finally I got a chance to meet a woman that used to work for Disney in animation. And she said, "If you really want to get a job over there, I'll give you a phone number to call." So I called, and they gave me an appointment, which I don't believe happens anymore these days. Mm-hmm. So I went in and I had an interview, and they said, "Yeah, we'll bring you on board." So I found out that they would hire me, and then they told me how much money I was going to make. I was going to make $30 a week. Well, I was working at a ceramic factory, and I was making $80 a week. And I went to my mom, and I said, "I can't afford to go to Disney. They can't afford to hire me." She says, "Go for it." And she says, "It'll all work out." So I did. I got a job working for Disney, and I also worked on the building sewer manholes on the weekend, so I could afford to have the job. So that was really quite an interesting time frame. But that went on for quite some time. But anyway, I hung in there.
I think most people know you from your work on the rides that you've worked on. You know, obviously Small World, Tiki Room, and then obviously helping to develop the Haunted Mansion. What did you think about working in animation, though? Because I feel like at least a lot of the interviews that I saw that you conducted, and even the great Imagineering story, it focuses more on the rides. What did you think about working in animation, though? Was that, I guess, as you alluded to, that was a little bit more of your actual original passion?
Yeah, well, working in animation was something else again, because when I got the job in animation, I didn't even know what animation was. I had no idea that you had to do every other drawing in a scene. So it was really quite of an exciting entrance to the animation department. But I loved it. I loved sitting there drawing all day long. And I went home at nighttime and I would practice some of the other characters that I had not been working on. And so I was filling my staff up with as much as I could as information and everything. And so it was kind of an exciting time. I couldn't wait to get to work in the mornings because I was just thrilled I was working for Disney. And like I said, building manholes was no big deal because it was important for me to do that just so I could continue with working for Disney, which really trained me, which was an unbelievable training that I went through, which was just great. So anyway,
tell them about working with the different animators.
Oh yeah. Well, luckily, the good news is there was the 9 old men that were the original guys that worked with Walt on Snow White. Well, I was fortunate because one of the last animator I worked for, I was his assistant, and that was Eric Larson, and he was one of the 9 old men. So to work for one of the 9 old men was really something special, and that was really good. And then, of course, the stories that went along with it, because when you worked with those guys, they've been working with Walt way back in the 30s, and so they really had some great stories to tell. So the stories are the most important part of the building of all this stuff that we were doing. So I had a great time. I just enjoyed it to no end.
What was the last animated work that you did work on?
Well, the last piece of animation I worked on I was still working with Eric Larson, and he had designed all the little puppies in one sequence, and he'd animated all those little puppies. And so he called me in one day, says, "Well, I got all the puppies animated for this sequence. He said, I want you to do the spots." So I had to do all the spots on all those puppies. And that took about 6 months, which was kind of an exciting time frame.
On 101 Dalmatians.
101 Dalmatians. Anyway, I loved it because the animator, that was Eric Larson, who was one of the Night Man, like I said, was really the sweetest damn man that was ever put on this planet. And so he was really sweet. He trained me. He taught me. And I had a wonderful time with him. I really did.
What do you think of the current day animated works by Disney? I remember hearing something about like Bob Iger. He basically said that the Disney Corporation was going to move away from making hand-drawn animated films, kind of like they're going to move away from that being a pivotal part of the business. And I can't even think of the last animated film that Disney produced that really, was kind of like a centerpiece for them in certain ways. Like I feel like most of their animated works today are primarily computer generated. What do you think about that?
Well, it's the evolution, it's bound to take place. And it's beautiful. What they're doing is beautiful. But what we did was came from the heart. I mean, it was just a time that none of that had ever been done before. So we were one of the original groups of people that were developing an organization that was going to explode. And so I feel good about that. I think that I love all the animation, whether it was now or then. It's just the idea that it's a delightful and a beautiful piece of entertainment. And the education of it is just incredible. So it's just an absolute love.
I think a lot of people, when they think about the animated films of Disney, I think for a number of people, that's kind of how they view Disney in their minds. Like they look at 101 Dalmatians or Snow White or Bambi, or maybe even people that are a little younger, they might look at things like Aladdin, and they kind of think of that as true Disney, the animated features. Real younger people, maybe children under the age of 10 or 15, they've basically really only been exposed to the computer generated films. I mean, that's primarily the ones that they've seen in theaters, or they've seen, I feel like there's a heart to them. There's a little bit of a difference to them that feels more fantastical, but also it feels like they kind of touch you more than the animated films. I don't know, I guess that's just my own opinion, though.
You're talking about the original animation.
Yeah, the original ones, or even the ones that came out in the 90s.
No, in fact, they seem to be, they were over-exaggerated. When you did the animation, you had to over-exaggerate it. And I think that was what gave it its charm, was it had to be over-exaggerated for the audience to see it and absorb it, to where the animation today is so technical that both of them are great. But we were in the naive years, so that was the good time frame.
I guess one thing I was wondering too, so obviously you've done a lot of work in creating Disneyland, essentially. I mean, you've done a number of things that people still see to this day, including the attractions, but even, smaller things like coming up with the designs for even like trash cans at the park. I guess one thing I was wondering about your opinion of Disneyland is, what makes Disneyland feel so, I guess for lack of a better term, magical or unique compared to other amusement parks?
When Walt wanted Disneyland, he actually was recapping his childhood and how he grew up. And that's what the park is all about, is family entertainment. He used to take his daughters over to the zoo to see the animals and everything. And Walt thought it was always great to do that, but he also felt that it was for the kids. And he wanted some place to go where the family could enjoy their times together. And so the theme park, Disneyland, was designed to get everybody involved and for the family to enjoy it at the same time, not just kids, not just adults. And he had a magic way of doing that. So that's what was the secret was that.
What do you always say about it hugs you and it's charming?
Yeah, it's charming. The umbrella or whatever that you're under is a very charming story. In other words, you're not selling anything. You're just having some charm. And I thought that's what's happened over the years, that Disney films and Disney parks lost the charm because there was a naive charm that made it so beautiful, and which is incredible. And a lot of that had to do with the original guys. There was a lot of charm about what the original guys did, and it showed up in the way they drew, their drawing capabilities. So it was great. And the best thing about it is a lot of those guys have tried to carry the charm on, but the park itself is outstandingly. That's beautiful. Well, there's a charm to the architecture, because what you're doing is you're recapping Walt's life. And everything they put into Disneyland was part of his life. And he wanted to keep that. And that's why all the tables are perfectly clean and everything about the park is just really immaculate. And Walt wanted it that way, and the employees carried on that charm. And over the years, it's gone. It's kind of a...
And you always said it always hugs you.
Yeah, it always hugs you, is right. Marie has heard me talk these stories so many times, she's better at it than I am.
So do you feel like today then, do you feel like the parks, I don't want to necessarily imply anything potentially negative, but do you feel like maybe for the Disney Corporation in general or the parks, is there a little bit too much of a corporate feel to them today?
Oh, yeah. There's no question about that. The charm is gone as far as the art is. The interesting thing about all the art and the backgrounds and the layouts and the architecture and everything was never done before this way. So that's where the charm was. In other words, Walt wanted you to feel like you were walking down a street that he grew up on. So they carried that through. It's kind of hard to pinpoint it, but that's basically it. You had to kind of feel like you were walking through Walt's life, which was beautiful, a beautiful little life, and what he went through to develop the park.
Well, and after he died, they didn't carry that.
No. The charm left, and that's sad, but that's what happens, you know. He kept the charm at the park. And he was an incredible man to work with, by the way, because when you sat in a meeting with him, he was no big deal. He was just a guy at the table with you, and he always talked to you about what you're doing. So Walt was more interested in what you were doing than what he was doing. So that I felt that was absolutely incredible. And he and I got along just beautifully because of that. And the other thing was, what I learned from him was always tell the truth. You know, don't do anything that's not true. And so we were very close on that, about telling the stories correctly, telling the truth, and keeping the charm going. And he had a great sense of humor because he, you know, in his heart, he was a cartoonist. So it was great because you could do some little crazy stuff that would seem weird, but no, he enjoyed it. He enjoyed the crazy humor that we had. So he never tried to change us. He always turned us loose, and we got along beautifully because of that.
Were his brothers, were Roy, was he, or I guess his one brother, was he similar to Walt himself? I mean, in all the documentaries, they always say he was kind of had more of like a business savvy. Was that really the case, or was he also pretty similar to Walt?
Oh, no, he was the bean counter. Roy Disney. He was not involved really in any
not at all.
aspect of the park except the money.
Well, the interesting thing about it was Walt would never let him come over to Wed, because Wed was his sandbox, and he didn't want Roy coming over there. And so it was kind of a cute little thing that kind of went on. And the most beautiful thing about this story is that after Walt had passed away, and we were all having a celebration up in the 33 Club, I had never met Roy. But Roy came up to me and he said, "Are you Rolly Crump?" And I said, "Yes, sir, yes, I am." And he says, "I just want to let you know that my brother used to talk about you." And Jesus Christ, that makes you want to cry every time you hear it, because what a wonderful way to find out what the old man thought of you, because you had no clue other than the fact that you were just good friends. But for him to say that, I was something special made me feel something special.
Do you stay in contact with the Disney family ever?
No, not a strong contact. I was close to the two daughters. In fact, the oldest of the two daughters, and she and I talked a lot. And she really loved my stories. And I did slide presentations about working with Walt, and she just loved those. So it was great for her to hear about what it was like to work with Walt, which was wonderful. And she's a delight.
That was fairly recent, in the last 10, 15 years that happened,
Yeah.
Is she still alive?
No.
Oh, okay.
She passed about 3 years ago, I think. 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, accidentally, actually.
Yeah, she fell down the stairs.
Oh, that's terrible. I didn't know that.
Actually, the last time you saw her was not that long. You did one of those slide presentations at the museum up there in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And then that was the last time you saw her.
Yeah, that was the last time I saw her.
Shortly after that, she had this accident, this fall, and then She was gone, yeah.
Yeah, that was really kind of sad.
I think the husband died too.
Yeah,
Ron Miller.
He just passed away recently, probably within the last year. Ron did.
You kind of mentioned a little bit about the park earlier, about how when Walt was alive that there was a charm to Disneyland that kind of maybe, I guess, in some sense hasn't necessarily translated since his passing. What do you feel like, what would Walt, do you think, would say about Disney today? Because I feel like when people look back at Disney, there's this nostalgic feel when there's, Walt Disney and there's the animation and there's all this, it's very playful and very carefree, and it's kind of like you're being transported into another world when you look back at some of the stuff that Walt made. But in today's Disney, I mean, it's the biggest media company in the world. I mean, Disney today owns ABC, Fox, Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, Vice. They own all these things, and it's a huge conglomerate. Was that kind of his vision for the Disney company, or?
No. The one thing about it is you'd never know what Walt wanted to do next. He always was surprising you, so there was no way to figure out what he was really going to do. The one thing he did want to do was Epcot, so he was very, very excited about that, which was kind of a sad story because he passed away during that time frame, and Epcot really didn't get anywhere near what he had in mind because the people working for Walt at that time didn't follow through on it correctly. And I got really upset about the whole damn thing. In fact, I got upset enough with it that they sent me to Disneyland to be a supervising art director for trash.
Oh, man.
Something went on. No. It was kind of a good job. I really enjoyed it, to be a supervising art director for Disneyland. So anyway, but I tried to pass on as many stories as I possibly could.
No, I don't think he would be happy with the company right now.
No.
Because he was not into...
No.
It wasn't about money. It was about the people.
Yeah, he was talking about
audience.
Entertainment and a naive way with entertainment. When he opened up Disneyland, in order for the people that were standing in line to get on the rides, he had these little orchestras that walked through the park and entertained people while they were standing in line. He didn't like the fact that people had to stand in line, so he wanted to entertain them while they were there. So that shows you where his heart was.
Oh, wow. I never heard that before. So originally Epcot was supposed to be like an actual city? Was that the original plan for it?
And it just got out of hand, and of course after Walt passed away it completely fell apart. And I worked on it for a couple of years, and I was really upset about it. And I showed how I was upset because they weren't sticking to the formula that originally had been done. And like I said, the charm disappeared. Yeah, well, what he wanted was large companies in the United States to come together and work as a team. He was talking like General Motors, Ford, and General Electric. He wanted all of them to have R&D facilities on the property at Epcot, so that there was working together. So he was trying to bring the big companies together and to work as a team. He was a team player. Everything Walt did, he did it with a team, and he wanted to pass that on and try and do Epcot with the idea that the teams are there and doing it.
It was an experimental city.
Experimental,
yeah,
exactly.
He was looking to the future, but not the way the company went into the future.
No.
Did something similar like that happen with Haunted Mansion? Because obviously, I mean, I've seen, I don't know, a half a dozen interviews that you've done where you've talked about the Haunted Mansion, and I figure I wouldn't talk your ear off about that because it seems like you've already said quite a bit about it. But one thing that I was hearing you do in an interview, you were talking about the Haunted Mansion and how originally there was supposed to be like a captain of a ship that was supposed to be a part of the attraction, and it was going to be something where his wife would come out of the fireplace, I guess the wife that he had murdered. And I think in that same interview, you mentioned something about how the Haunted Mansion was supposed to, like, you're supposed to walk through it, or I guess it was going to have some kind of people mover component, so you wouldn't actually be in like a carriage, I guess. Do you feel like the Haunted Mansion, because of Walt's passing, just totally changed? Like the whole ride basically changed?
No, not at all. Not whatsoever. There was a big kind of a political atmosphere about the Haunted Mansion. Walt wanted it to be entertaining, and he wanted it to be as realistic as we could be. Like, for example, the ride through the Haunted Mansion, and also the other ride that we wanted, the Pirates. And Walt wanted people to be in the actual ride itself and feel like they're part of the show. And, of course, as time went on, that all disappeared. I mean, it fell apart.
It was supposed to be a walkthrough originally. Right?
Yeah, originally it was going to be a walkthrough. Walt wanted it as a walkthrough, but they panicked a little bit because they thought if the kids are walking through the ride, they might run into it and run around on it and everything. So there was a lot of stuff messed up with that. He didn't, he was busy doing a lot of things at that time, and really wasn't able to spend the amount of time on the mansion that he would have normally. I had the problem with the management was Walt wanted it to be a scary ride. I wanted it to be a scary ride. The management didn't. They wanted it kind of like a cartoon ride. And Walt and I both thought that was wrong. In fact, I remember Walt saying one day, people love to be scared. And so that was the mold that I worked from. I did everything I could possibly do. I came up with came up with an idea of a Museum of the Weird. It's just actually based on a bunch of weird drawings that I did. And Walt saw those drawings, obviously liked them because he called me. He came to work the next morning. He was at my desk at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the first thing he said to me was, "You son of a bitch." And I thought, oh, my God, what did I do now? He says, no. He says, all that stuff, crazy stuff that you showed me yesterday, I couldn't sleep last night. I couldn't sleep. I didn't know what to do with it. So he says, but I've come to the conclusion that a lot of the scary stuff you want to do and everything, it will be in the Museum of the Weird. And so there's always been this great little hidden story about Rolly, Walt, in the Museum of the Weird, which never took place. But anyway, it was fun. It was fun.
That was the early stages before the World's Fair when you were working on it. And then it got put on hold for a number of years, and then Walt was gone.
Yeah.
And then they did their own thing. But Marcus also asked Rolly about the illusion, about the fisherman.
Oh, the wife of the fireplace. Well, yeah, that was actually that was part of the walkthrough to begin with. Was the wife, and she was the, and we actually did a full-scale mock-up in the soundstage to show Walt, so he would see all the illusions that we created, and he just loved it because we actually had all these weird things going on in there, and we're really trying to scare the public, and it was a ball because he was fun to work with. Well, Yale Gracie came up with all the tremendous illusions that were used. In fact, I've always felt that Yale Gracie never got the credit he should have gotten because he was really the one that put the stuff in the park. I mean, in the mansion that were really scary, spooky, and the illusions that he created is what made it. If you took the illusions out of the mansion, then you wouldn't have a scary mansion at all. Supposedly, as the story went, was the fellow that died, and his ghost lived in the mansion, and his wife that he had killed his wife, so he had murdered her and bricked her up in the wall behind the fireplace. So when you go on the ride, you get a chance to take a peek at their ghost. You can take a peek at the ghost of where she was bricked up behind the wall. And you take a picture of the ghost of the old man that lived there that died. And so it was a good story. It was fun. It was great.
What do you
did a mock-up to show Walt in one of the sound stages. So that was another thing. Walt always wanted to see models or three-dimensional things that were actually working so he'd get a better feel of what it was.
What do you think of the finished product of the Haunted Mansion? Like, do you like the way that it is now?
Well, I think if it wasn't for the illusions, it'd be a piece of crap. Illusions kind of keep it from being a piece of crap, which is kind of a funny story, by the way. I did the Tower of the Four Winds for the World's Fair, which was a big tower, 120 foot high. Walt asked me because I did a lot of propellers. So he says, I want you to do this museum of the Tower of the Four Winds. And he says, so I want that as a marquee for It's a Small World. So I said, okay. So I designed a beautiful little model and shipped it to them, and they went ahead and built the tower. And the problem was that it got over-engineered and it became very ugly as far as I was concerned. So Walt finally asked me one day, he says, what do you think of the tower? And I said, I think it's a piece of crap. He said, Roland, it can't be a piece of crap. It cost me $400,000. Oh, was it 200,000?
Every time you say
Oh, yeah. So anyway, I said, okay, it's not a piece of crap. Yeah, I had to do a model to show him. But that was the thing I loved about him, and he loved the fact that I was honest and truthful with him. Can you imagine? You design something for Walt, and he asks you what you think of it, and you think it's a piece of crap. I mean, I don't know any other designer that would have ever done that with Walt.
Have you seen the Haunted Mansion when they have the Nightmare Before Christmas stuff on it? Do you like the way that the ride looks with that stuff, or no? You know how, like, around Christmas time, they have a Nightmare Before Christmas, that movie?
We haven't seen, I don't think we've seen it at Christmas. We saw it at Halloween. Oh, did we see it at Christmas? Maybe we did.
I don't think so.
We didn't like it, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even remember exactly why.
The film director, Guillermo del Toro, who, he's done a lot of things like Hellboy, Shape of Water, a number of other kind of strange films. He was talking about the desire to make a Haunted Mansion movie, and I'm not really sure where exactly that whole process ended up going, but he showed some artwork, I think, or at least concept ideas for the film. Did Guillermo del Toro, the film director, did he ever contact you in the process of trying to write that script or anything?
No, he never had, no.
Did they ever contact you for the really terrible Eddie Murphy Haunted Mansion movie that came out, I don't know, 17 years ago, probably?
No, that's on a different plateau.
That movie was, I think that film came out around the same time as Pirates of the Caribbean, and I think Disney, they probably thought, oh, we'll make Pirates of the Caribbean big and Haunted Mansion, and a lot of people hated that Haunted Mansion movie. I remember seeing it in theaters, and even when I was a little kid, I didn't really much care for it.
There were a lot of dumb decisions made after Walt died.
Oh, God, yeah.
Nobody was in charge.
Yeah. Very sad story.
Does your son still work for the Disney Corporation?
No, he retired.
I'm not really sure exactly the Imagineering titles. Like, is everyone that works in Imagineering called an Imagineer? Or I know there's like a Hall of Fame of Imagineers. I know that you're in that Hall of Fame, but is everyone that works in Imagineering called an Imagineer?
The Imagineers was 8 of us. Actually, there was only 4 of us, I think, that were called Imagineers to begin with. And then it kind of grew from there. And then they were just employees. They weren't necessarily Imagineers. But it's a great title. Walt came up with that title, so we loved it.
Chris worked in WED, and he is considered an Imagineer.
Yes, he is.
But he is not an artist. He was... Marcus, I worked at Disney, too, for a long time, so that's why...
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
That's why I have my own personal opinions, and you're hearing all of my comments, too.
What was the time frame that you worked at Disney for?
Oh, way back in 65 to 73 or 72. Walt was still living. I worked there. I didn't know Rolly at the time, but we kind of met.
That's really cool. I didn't know any of that lore, that you guys actually met. Okay.
No, we met through a mutual friend. I introduced to him. That was 40 years ago. And then 30 years passed, and then we met. He had an art show here in Oceanside. The rest, that was in 2003, and the rest is history.
Okay. Did you guys have other family members, too, that worked for the Disney Corporation, or was it just the 3 of you guys?
No, just Rolly has 3 children, and Chris, and then he has 2 girls. Chris is the only one that worked for the company. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like for Disney, for myself, I grew up throughout my life. I've gone to the park numerous times. I've had passes. I haven't been to the park in probably like 5.5 years, something like that. But I think for a lot of people that are around my age, there's definitely a sense of awe and respect, and definitely a love and affection towards the park, towards Disneyland. When I go to Disneyland, I still feel like there is that sense, or especially walking down Main Street, this sense of uniqueness and something that seems... It doesn't feel like it's in real life. You can't capture it. And I definitely don't feel like that for California Adventure. I feel like California Adventure feels like an amusement park, but...
Disneyland is an escape. You walk in there and you forget that there's a world outside. You just do, or at least you did. Especially early on. It was magical. It just was magical. First of all, I don't even think they allowed strollers way back when, early on. So a lot of the charm is gone because there's so many people, so big. They've taken out some of the really special attractions. But that's what it is. It's an escape. You just walk in there. reality, and you don't feel that way every place. On the other attractions, you walk into the other ones and it's chaotic, and you get caught up in the chaos. And now Disneyland is kind of that way because it is. I mean, the wall-to-wall strollers, you can't even walk in the park. That's one reason why we really stayed away the last few years.
And I have no problems with something like, Star Wars or Marvel properties. I don't have any issues with them at all, but they just don't really feel like Disney. I don't know. They just feel like they were an acquisition. I
don't think Walt would have allowed any of it to happen, personally. He always wanted the park to grow, and people will always say, well, he never wanted it to be a museum. He wanted it to... Well, I'm sure it's true, but he would have had control over how it grew and how it changed, and it would not have ended up the way it is. And, when you mentioned about, your generation, Rolly talks to young people all the time. He have podcasts, they call him, and they all are... have this sense of nostalgia about what it used to be, and they wish it was still. And it's sad. And Rolly always said, this is the one park, Disneyland, just Disneyland, could have remained like a museum, just set in time. Because every year there's a new generation of kids, and, it didn't need to be reflecting what's going on in the world today. It could have been just a little magical place past, but... they didn't do that, and here we are. And Rolly's back, so I took over the...
Thank you.
It's no problem. I'll say that's the first time that's happened in an interview, though, where there's been like a tag out. Like, you guys you ever seen wrestling matches where they'll tag in a partner? It's almost like that.
I was tagged, yeah, exactly.
Since you kind of raised the idea, I guess, a little bit, what do you guys think about the Pirates of the Caribbean, the fact that there's been so many changes, I guess, for, I guess they would say, for modern sensibilities? What do you guys think about that?
Well, we were on the ride after some of the changes on the Pirates, on the pirate ride, and when they, incorporated some of the characters from the movie, and it seemed to work.
It worked all right. The evolution.
Well, I think the one that people seem to have an issue with is the female that they transformed into being like, I guess she was like going to be one of the women sold at the auction she kind of became like a warrior pirate woman.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous, personally.
Yeah.
When they took out that whole little scene about, they were going to auction off the woman.
Oh, yeah. They did.
Yeah, because somebody wrote a letter and complained, and
I remember that. Yeah, and that's the sad thing about it is that as the years went by, people would write in all kinds of stuff that they didn't like, and the park would change it instead of saying screw off. No, I mean, Walt always said this is what it is, and that's it. And all these people had their opinions, and their opinions really were not. So, anyway.
Well, definitely, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on. This is a good, long interview, and I definitely appreciate you guys coming on so much. So I know that you wrote a book. Are you working on a sequel to it, or how can we kind of keep up if people want to hear more fun stories from you, or just learn more about your past and your biography and everything?
Well, he has another book coming out on Amazon. It's supposed to be right as we were speaking, the middle of April. But it's not. It's just a book about his artwork. It's not like the other book. So his book, it's kind of a cute story. He did a number of little CDs, like little follow-up additional stories. So I think there were CDs that followed the book. Other than that, not doing much in the way of writing or just sharing on podcasts and some interviews. We've had a couple of film crews coming. One was supposed to come beginning of the month, and that had to be canceled because we're all hiding out these days. So
I think you're allowed to take a little bit of a step back when you're 90 years old. So I guess that makes sense to not be working full time. But
yeah, I think it's okay. But I do want to tell you, I thank you for calling. And I hope we answered some of the questions, and I hope you carry on.
Well, definitely. I thank you so much for coming on, and I definitely appreciate I feel very gracious that you're able to come on and talk about the park and everything, and I think it's amazing, and definitely I'm very glad that I watched that documentary that you were featured in, and I'm definitely very appreciative of the work that you did, even if some of the things that you worked on have been changed over time. I mean, I'm very appreciative of the work that you did, and it's actually personally one of my favorite rides, and I know that work that you did got into the ride, and definitely I'm very appreciative of that.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
That was a lot of work.
I completely believe it. And especially, I mean, I heard in one of your interviews how you had to, I guess it was for the Tiki Room, you had to do something with the clay and the sun in the parking lot.
Yeah,
that you were actually...
Yeah, that's right. Those are the good old days.
I mean,
You did whatever it took.
And I mean, there's, been, I don't know how many people have seen, I mean, things that you did, I mean, have been seen by, I don't know, hundreds of millions of people. I mean, it truly is incredible and everything. But definitely, again, yeah, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on, and stay safe and everything. And
thank you, Marcus.
Thank you again.
And thank you. And if you have any other questions, you call us back. No problem.
All right, sounds good. Have a good rest of your day, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Bye-bye.
We want to thank today's sponsors again, the Tax Defense Group and Rider Junkie. You can contact the Tax Defense Group at 800-850-7973. And Rider Junkie's phone number again was 805-587-7966.